It's well known that Mabon or Mabon isn't an authentic Welsh name for the autumn equinox. What is less well known is that there really was a Welsh holiday named after Mabon, but of a very different nature. So this is the wheel of the year, which will be very familiar to modern pagans. And if you see at the top, we have Yule, still a well-known name for midwinter and used as a synonym for Christmas. That's the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. At the bottom, we have the summer solstice, here named Litha. And then on the right, we have Ostera, uh, which is familiar for its connection with Easter. And on the left, Mabon, which to many people who aren't modern pagans or don't know anything about modern paganism, they probably won't be familiar with the name Mabon used for the autumn equinox. And in between, we have Imbolc on the 1st of February, or around that time, Beltane, the 1st of May, Lunacer, the 1st of August, Samhain, 1st of November, or 31st of October, also known as Halloween. Now, those last four names are all Irish names: Imbolc, Beltane, Lunacer, Samhain. And Yule, Ostera, and Litha come from Anglo-Saxon or Old English. So Mabon is an outlier as the only Welsh name here. So why is that the case? Well, the Wheel of the Year is a very simple and elegant and fulfilling way of dividing up the year between the solstices and the equinoxes, and then the cross quarter days, which occur approximately halfway between a solstice and an equinox. And in fact, you don't really have to be a modern pagan to appreciate this scheme. It is very elegant. It's just a lovely way of dividing up the year. It includes many of the festivals that, whether they were Christian in origin or partook of older pagan festivals, are still very familiar to us, like midwinter, midsummer. You know, we celebrate Christmas as the largest festival in the modern Western world. Samhain, Halloween is huge these days. Easter, of course. And then the others kind of fit in pretty naturally. In bulk, we're seeing the beginning of spring, supposedly. Beltane, May Day is still a public holiday. Lunacer is a bit less visible, but the 1st of August, that's often around a public holiday, I think, in many countries. And Samhain, as I mentioned, Halloween is very popular. Um, but the autumn equinox isn't particularly celebrated in the modern Western world. The closest Christian holiday to that is St. Michael's Day. Um, and that kind of fits quite nicely in a way. But anyway, uh, St. Michael wasn't used as a kind of template for this modern pagan calendar. So where does this come from? It comes from a guy named Aidan Kelly, and on his blog he wrote, back in 1973, I was putting together a pagan craft calendar, the first of its kind as far as I knew, listing the holidays, astrological aspects, and other stuff of interest to pagans. It offended my aesthetic sensibilities that there seemed to be no pagan names for the summer solstice or the fall equinox, equivalent to Ostera or Beltane, so I just decided to supply them. Began wondering if there had been a myth similar to that of Kore in a Celtic culture. She's also known as Persephone. She is the goddess who was abducted, taken down to the underworld, and so she spent the winter in the underworld. And spring returns when Persephone or Kore leaves the underworld. There was nothing very similar in the Gaelic literature, but there was in the Welsh, in the Mabinogion collection, the story of Mabon ap Modron, which translates as the son of the mother, just as Kore simply meant girl. whom Gwydion rescues from the underworld, much as Theseus rescued Helen. That's why I, Aidan Kelly, picked Mabon as a name for the holiday. Now, there are a few problems there. Mabon doesn't exactly mean son. Um, Mab is son or boy or male infant. That on suffix indicates that it was originally a divine name. We'll get onto that a little bit. Um, and also, although Mabon does appear in the Mabinogion, he isn't in the underworld and he isn't rescued by Gwydion. Mabon appears in Culhwch ac Olwen, and King Arthur rescues Mabon from imprisonment, and it's part of a story. Culhwch has to um, meet all these challenges set by his prospective father-in-law, so he can win the hand of the maiden Olwen. And one of these is to get a comb which is in the bristles of the magical boar Twrch Trwyth. And it's only Mabon, the great hunter, who will be able to do that. So little bits of that are true, but there's no real connection between Mabon and the autumn equinox. In fact, there's no connection at all, um, which is why it kind of sits uneasily with many people. But it has become a popular name. I mean, a lot of Americans pronounce it Mabon. So if you can have a go at pronouncing it Mabon, yeah, already tiny bit more authentic. Now we have to fiddle around. Here we are. So who was Mabon? Well, the name comes from Maponos. And if you can see here, in the second line, you have Apolloni Maponos from this stone that survived in the north of England. So Maponos was being identified with the god Apollo, and the name of Maponos, so it means kind of divine son. That on suffix indicates divinity. And that if you look at the word Maponos and you wonder how would that develop into Welsh, well, Brythonic. So this is the in kind of partly Latin and with from a Brythonic name. So this was the sort of predecessor language to Welsh, and when the language developed and split into Welsh and Breton, the Cornish language, a couple of things happened in the kind of sound changes that you had in Welsh. One was that these words and Latin words lost their endings. And then you got what's known as the soft mutation or the treiglad meddal, uh, that in this case is happening in the middle of the word. So to get from maponos, you knock off the endings, you get mapon, and then the p becomes a b. And you can hear there's a only very slight difference between p and b, and that's that the in b it's a voiced consonant, so it's being sounded in your throat. It's the same sound, but it's sounded in your throat when it's the b. So that's where the name Mabon comes from. There's a lot of skepticism these days as to whether you can show that the figure in the Mabinogion, Mabon Modron, and Modron is also a name that develops regularly from Matrona, Divine Mother. So whether you can show that the kind of stories attributed to Mabon really had anything to do with the god Maponos. I mean, I think it's kind of special pleading almost to say that you have this supernatural character in the Mabinogion whose name clearly and indisputably comes from Maponos, and to say that he has no relationship with the god seems like denying the obvious, to be honest. Anyway, so in Culhwch and Olwen, Mabon was taken from his mother when he was 3 nights old. He was needed to hunt Twrch Trwyth. Uh, no one knew where Mabon was or if he was even alive. Once they found his nearest relative, um, some of Arthur's men, Kai and Bedwyr among them, went to question the oldest animals as to the location of Mabon, and eventually they found out that he was imprisoned in Caer Loyw, which is the Welsh name for Gloucester, the English town or city, I suppose, cathedral city that's on the other side of the border. So Arthur and his warriors of Britain attacked the fort. Kai broke through the wall and carried Mabon away on his back. Mabon then took part in the hunting of the boar Trwyth on the horse of Gweddw, and they chased the boar into the Severn and seized a razor from it. And his Mabon is also mentioned in a couple of other places. I think so. The Cilchwch ac Olwen is dated to about 1100 AD, and there's a poem, Pagwr, from the Black Book of Carmarthen, uh, in which he's also mentioned. The manuscript of the Black Book of Carmarthen is older than the Red Book of Hergest and the White Book of Rhyddech, in which the Mabinogion stories are found. But I think that poem is dated around the same time as Cilchwch ac Olwen. Anyway, so now we need to fiddle a little bit more. Now, okay, so we can all agree that Mabon isn't an ancient name for the autumn equinox, and it's not used in Wales, to be honest, apart from with some modern pagans. Again, I don't have any problem with anybody using the name, except it just doesn't really seem to fit. Anyway, but the odd thing is that there actually was a Welsh holiday known as Dydd Mabon, as you can see on this playbill here from a pantomime. And you can see at the top, Dydd Mabon, Mabon's Day, which is Dydd Llun, in this case, Ionawr Chwechfed, so the Monday, the 6th of January. And a daily performance for pantomime, Areneth Fach, ar Fantell Goch. So the little girl and the red cloak. So which I needn't bother translating. So at the bottom it says Little Red Riding Hood. So what was Dydd Mabon? When did it appear? Why is it called Mabon? Well, Mabon was the bardic name of a 19th century union leader in Wales. So his real name was William Abraham, and he used a bardic name, Mabon. And his dates were 1842 to 1922. He was an MP and a miners' leader, and he negotiated a day off every month for miners in South Wales on the first Monday of the month. This became known as Mabon's Day, Dydd Mabon, or Gwyl Mabon, Mabon's festival or holiday. So why was it called Mabon? Well, this is part of Eisteddfod culture. So the national Eisteddfod and local Eisteddfods were really, really popular in the 19th century. That they'd never quite died out, but they definitely had revival in the 19th century period. That's a whole story in itself. Uh, so the Eisteddfod, in the sense of poetry competitions using these traditional Welsh poetic forms, goes back quite a way into the medieval period. And there were several notable Eisteddfods at various points. And then the tradition had been petering out, but it's still ongoing. You know, just people were meeting up in pubs in the 18th century and having little poetry competitions in Welsh. Um, but Iolo Morganwg, who's a local boy, local to me in the Vale of Glamorgan, um, he helped to revive these traditions, partly by inventing loads of new traditions and passing them off as authentic. So uh, Aidan Kelly isn't the only person to invent Welsh tradition. It's actually Wales has something of a tradition of inventing traditions. Anyway, so in these 19th century Eisteddfods, the bards took on names, often from the names of earlier poets, like the Taliesin is probably possibly the most famous Welsh poet, apart from Dafydd ap Gwilym. So there was a Taliesin or Avion. Somebody used a pseudonym, a pen name, a bardic name, using the names of earlier poets. But William Abraham, he decided to use the name Mabon, and he must have got that from the Mabinogion. The Mabinogion had been translated into English. It was a big hit in Lady Charlotte Guest's translation. Um, it was also being, it had been republished in Welsh uh, uh, in certain collections. But probably most people would have encountered it in English. Anyway, so there's no doubt that William Abraham, the miners' leader, got the name from the Mabinogion, and that his name comes from Mabon uh, ap Modron. And obviously, this became very popular, having first Monday of the month off, you know, and there was a lot of money in coal mining, and the coal owners were very reluctant to share it with the workers. So every concession was, wrung from the hands of the coal owners. William Abraham Mabon was apparently a moderate as a union leader, and in this case, it was a successful tactic because uh, Dydd Mabon was established for a couple of decades, I think. Apparently, his later history was a bit seedy. He became an MP, and he was certainly enjoyed some of the wealth that goes along with that. But anyway, so here we have this oddity that Mabon or Mabon is a pretty new invention for the autumn equinox. But there was a somewhat older Dydd Mabon um, that already existed. So, is there a relation between the two? Well, I posted about this a few years ago on Twitter, and I think Gaydon Kelly must have seen it because he posted said no, no, people suggesting I got it from another place, but no, I did invent it in the 1973. So, fair enough, take him at his word. It's just an odd coincidence, and of course, you know. A Monday off every month for the miners is very different to the kind of celebrations that modern pagans would have on the autumn equinox. So, are there other names for the equinox in Welsh? And there are, I was researching some of these. So, I'm sure a lot of people just say equinox. You know, what's the Welsh word for equinox? Well, what's the English word for equinox? I mean, equinox comes from Latin, possibly via French. It means, of course, equal night, because the length of the daytime and the nighttime is equal during the equinoxes. But some of the Welsh words that we have, cahydnos, which means literally equal length night. You can see the relationship between Norse and Nox, between the Celtic word and the Latin there. Cahydnos y Hydra is the autumnal equinox, and there's another word, cahydedd, which can also mean equator, so it means a kind of equal thing, which is more used more poetically. I don't think people would use that in everyday speech. However, we do have other terms for the solstices and equinox. Alban Arthan for the winter solstice, Alban Eilir for the spring equinox, Alban Hevin for the summer solstice, and Alban Elved for our autumn equinox. And you can see up here, these are entries from the Geiriadur Prifysgol Cymru, the University of Wales dictionary. So for Alban Elved in particular, you can see, so it's 18th to 19th century. I happen to know that it's quoting a manuscript source here from the Llanover manuscripts. And there's a, a sentence just kind of using the words actually. See Cahedydd that I mentioned as a word for equinox. So you have Cahedydd no Cahyddedd Nos a Dydd, so equal time, if you like, of day and night. Angwyl yr Alban Elfed in the festival of Alban Elfed. So it's at the equinox. Um, Now you can actually see if you look at Elved below that, which it says means autumn. This reference here in 1795, that's to William Owen Pugh's dictionary, and he defines Elved as autumn, Alban Elved as the autumnal equinox. Now, here we go back to our old friend Iolo, and you can see right at the bottom another reference comes from the Iolo uh, manuscripts. So Iolo Morganwg, again, the local boy who made lots of stuff up. So he probably, or pretty definitely, was the inventor of these terms, Alban, Elved, because they don't make an awful lot of etymological sense, actually. I mean, people have tried to work out where they're getting these names from, um, but it's a bit speculative. Anyway, so these pretty much come from Iolo. Um, Elved, there is a name, the Kingdom of Elmet, which I think was in Yorkshire. The Welsh for that is Elved. You can see how, again, through the sort of soft mutation, the Elmet has become Elved through those developments. And there's a poet and hymn writer, excuse me, who used the bardic name Elved, who's very famous hymn writer who died in the 20th century and lived in my hometown of Penarth. I think he's buried there. And around the corner from my nan, there was Elved Avenue, although most people locally actually pronounced it Elfed, I have to confess. And my grandbams also lived on Elved Green. So probably nothing to do with the with autumn or the equinox, but coming from the bardic name of this hymn writer. Now, if you look at the third entry from the top, you see 1816 Robert Roberts' Daire the Eith, and they have a quote there where he refers to Alban Elved a Mish Medi in September. And so this is a section from Daire the Eith, which means geography. And Robert Roberts, interestingly, he also wrote another book called Sera the Eith, which could mean astronomy or astrology. Uh, and that one is full of magical material. It's full of folk astrology. It has magical spells. It has translations of grimoires into Welsh. And I've been working on that for a while. I was hoping to publish it a couple of years ago, but I still need to do some work on it. But I will be publishing his Sera the Eith as a Welsh book of knowledge probably next year. So you can see here anyway that he makes mention of Alban Eilir, Alban Hevin. You can see that they actually did use the V rather than F for the first sound at that point on occasion. And then in the middle, Alban Elved and Mish Medi. And actually, Hevin actually makes a lot more sense. It's to do with summer, like the Welsh for June is Mehefin. Uh, so related to the word half for summer. Anyway, so these terms were invented by Iolo Morganwg, but they quickly went native and they became part of popular folk culture. And people just didn't realize that he'd invented them. And this was a bit of a problem for a while. His Iolo Morganwg's additional tales about some of the figures from the Mabon and various stories of saints and various folk tales. That he was genuinely a collector of ancient manuscripts, medieval manuscripts, and he generally kind of was at the tail end of the bardic tradition. He actually did get bardic training from a couple of sort of country bards, but what he was getting in his bardic training was grammar and how to use Welsh verse forms, that kind of thing. Not ancient myths that had survived in secret. Anyway, so his work became very popular without people even realizing that, for the most part, that it was his own invention. And Wales in the 19th century had this thriving publishing industry, most of which was done in Welsh. And there were loads of periodicals of various kinds, many of them sort of non-conformist Christian religious journals, I have to say. But this was an interesting one. A Brython, so the Briton, in the sense of an ancient Briton, the predecessors of the Welsh. Cylchgrawn Llenyddol. So Cylchgrawn is like a circular periodical. Llenyddol is literary. Um, and you can see here, this was from Alban Elfed, 1863. So these periodicals, this was obviously a quarterly. So said this one comes out at Alban Elfed, the Autumn Equinox. And also, I've seen sort of poster bills and programs for Eisteddfodau, that are also define you know, the timing according to the Albans. So isn't that strange? We do have genuine native terms for the equinox in Wales, but they're kind of, you know, they're no more meaningful than the English term equinox. Just means, equal night and day. Mabon is a fairly recent invention, but the guy who invented it is straightforward about that. He doesn't pretend that it came from anywhere else. It doesn't really fit autumn, unfortunately, but you know, if you like it, stick with it. Um, but there used to be a Mabon's Day of a completely different nature, the first Monday of a month, and the poor miners, got a day off for it. And many of us in South Wales, descended from miners. My Bampy, my maternal grandfather, was very briefly a miner in the 1930s when he was a teenager. Probably luckily for him, he was only down the pit for a few months before he got laid off because of the 1930s and terrible economic conditions. But in another way, it's probably to his benefit. So I hope you enjoyed that. That went on a lot longer than I expected it to, but maybe that's the length that suits me, my natural length of presentation. So I'll be back soon with something else. What will it be? Maybe something about my magical researches. My research is into historical Welsh magic, in which I've done, a lot of individual original research. Let's find out.